make things messy. Try to attack Magnus if you can. Do not get bogged down into a long strategic fight. It will not end well. In the meantime, though, Magnus does start with white, so first job for Fedoseev, survive the first game. Then you can think about outmaneuvering the opponent when you have white in the next.
It's a really good point. Starting with the black pieces, just make sure no disaster strikes early. And you alluded to Mikhail Tal's forest of complication, where the path out is wide enough for just one player. So try to make the water muddy. Try to get him into messy situations. Robert, do you agree that that is Fedoseev's best chance here? Try to get as much chaos in?
Well, I think for Fedoseev, he is a combative player by nature, but it can backfire. And look at this. He plays the Petrov defense from the black side, which I think is a good choice against Magnus, because Magnus Carlsen is the better player. That's clear. But what Fedoseev, where he can backfire, is just like against Alireza Firouzja. In that fourth game, he was lost, right? He was down a couple pawns, but in the time scramble is where he was able to shine. So I think that Fedoseev, he needs to keep the games going. Magnus is a brilliant speed chess player. He's won the speed chess championship. He made it to the finals of the bullet chess championship, but that's where he has the most opportunity to go wrong, late stage of the game when you don't have enough time. So I think that Fedoseev, he chose a wise opening in game one.
Times have changed. When I was young, okay, Magnus there, a bit distracted, maybe closing the curtains. But when I was young, this opening, if anyone played this way against the Petrov, trying to trade off queens early, we would have laughed them out of chess. We would have told them, this isn't the game for you. You know, you're too timid. Nobody likes players who play for a draw. But Magnus plays this type of position for a win. It's so symmetrical, but white has 2 extra tempi for now, and it's all about placing the pieces on their best squares. Yes, the queens have gone. I guess Magnus is simply arguing that there's enough forces, there's enough of his army left to cause some problems later. He's beaten the likes of Jan Nepomniachtchi before in this type of position, but I'm still skeptical. Magnus, why? Why not entertain us? We want to see more checkmates. But Fedoseev, he's going to emerge unscathed from the opening, and the battle's really going to be postponed towards the endgame now. Robert, surprised at all? Are you as scathing as me? Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh about this opening choice.
I was surprised, but I think that it's Fedoseev playing something that he doesn't always trot out. So I think that Magnus Carlsen, as you said, he likes getting positions where there isn't so much risk. He can outplay his opponent. And we saw just before the latest move that the draw rate was through the roof. So, Tanya, when the history shows that black can hold on quite frequently, I think players, they think, let's go for that. But against Magnus Carlsen, it's a totally different game.
Absolutely agree with you. This is a queenless middle game. Well, there is an obvious but a big threat on the board immediately by Magnus. That knight jumping in, knight takes c7. So it's something that you need to take care of immediately. He falls back with the bishop. And yes, the queens are off the board, but the gloves are still on, because I think the players want to still fight it out. Magnus, we've seen him do crazy things in the end game. So I'm still expecting this to be a fight. He's fighting for more space right now. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a slow one, but we've got a game on our hands. It's far from over when you're playing against Magnus. I think it only gets scarier when the queens are off.
I'm inclined to agree. I've suffered so many times at the hands of Magnus. I think we all have at this point. Once the queens are off, he knows better than anyone. He just has this feel of where the pieces belong. He spins his web, and sooner or later, it does get tactical, it does sharpen up, and then he takes his chances. I've got to say, he's handled this really well. No weaknesses at all in the black camp. Black's king is castled. The rook will slide across to e8. It's just about how white develops the pieces. The white king needs to choose a side. Maybe it'll sit in the center, but I don't see why black should ever be worse. You kick back the white knight, you develop your own pieces. This should be level with equal play. It's just about whether Magnus can exert that magic a bit later. Without meaning to be too pessimistic about this game, should we check out the opening, the early stages of the other battle, the clash of the underdogs? Jose Martinez against Denis Lazovic.
Weight loss walking. Walk fit.
Martinez against Denis Lazovic. That one, still early doors as well, but okay. Looks like a quiet variation of the Spanish. Very symmetrical there as well, Robert. What do you make of that opening? Who's it going to favor?
On the left-hand side of our screen, we see a position with no pawns have left the board, only a pair of knights for each side. So it's a slow start for both of these games, both matches. I think they're just settling in without creating any major threats. And Denis Lazovic, he has the black piece in this game. He is incredibly difficult to defeat. Not only yesterday when he outlasted Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in Armageddon by having a position that was never worse from the black side, but I remember in the 2023 season, he played a match against Sam Sevian, who's about super grandmaster, one of the best players in the United States, and they drew 12 games in a row. All right, he just doesn't lose no matter who he's playing. So it's a rare sight for him to actually get in trouble because he's so solid. And it's no surprise to me in this game, Tanya, that Jose, he is trying to come up with some ideas that give him an advantage. And Denis is saying, no, you're not going to get that because I am one of the most grounded players on the planet.
Yes, I think it's so important for Jose to try to just keep as many pieces on the board, try and get Denis low on the clock. But Denis, so far, has been doing great. He's got about a minute and a half advantage there. I think the one spot where perhaps Jose would have a better chance is if it becomes a true time scramble. We've seen Jose do amazing things with just seconds on the clock. Meanwhile, in the previous season, we saw Denis go down on the clock and struggle in those situations, especially if the position was still complicated. Denis has great endgame technique. Jose, meanwhile, he seems to really thrive when there are complications and less time on the clock. So this is going to go down to those seconds. Who's got those extra seconds when there's a time scramble? It's still far off from now. A really level start. Right now, I'm already looking at ideas for Jocelyn. Can he try and go all out? Can he try and strike in the center? There are two breaks that come to my mind, Robert. D4 or F4. Is this something that Black needs to keep an eye out on?
For sure. And I just want to point out, you called him Jospum, and somebody like, who's Jospum? I don't see any Jospums here. Jose, he's a streamer, he's a content creator, and that is his online handle. So, I agree with you, David. I'm going to throw it to you because I'm not sure what White should aim for. Is it going to be D4? Is it going to be F4? How are you opening up this position?
Or D5.
I think the answer is neither after Denis Lazovic's last move. Tanya, your ideas scared Denis so much that he decided to strike first. And why not? If you are able to set up a strong pawn center like this with either color, normally you're the one holding the key to the center. You're the one who decides when to trade off later. It's up to Denis when to take this pawn in the center. But first of all, okay, a trade there. White's knight was too strong on f5, could not be tolerated, and now White has the bishop pair. So I'm liking Black's pawn center, but I'm liking the potential of these White bishops, especially if White gets one or two more moves, is able to unleash the beast and this bishop and queen on the same diagonal, checkmating threats in the air. Not right now, but Denis has to watch out for that. First, I'm expecting him to just continue in his trademark style, Denis Lazovic, improve his pieces, bring all the pieces to the party, nice coordination, and that's why he very rarely loses games. He doesn't leave any structural weaknesses ever. I very rarely see him with doubled pawns, for example, and he nearly never has bad pieces either. So yes, White has the longer term advantage of the bishops, but I think he's doing everything. Robert, how should Jose start playing now? What would give White reason for optimism?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think Jose knows what to do either. He is below on the clock, and as you were pointing out, when you have bishops, you want open space, open diagonals, but any pawn move or capture, it leaves either a square or a potential weakness behind, and we did just see that exchange of pawns in the center. Black can take back pretty much with any of the three pieces that can take on d5, but it's also this bishop on c7 that may get an open diagonal in the future if Black continues to push in the center. So I love this from Denis. Tanya, he takes with the pawn on d5. That would have been my first instinct. Do you like the pawns in the center or the fact that White can challenge them?
I like the pawns in the center. I think they control not only the squares like c4 and e4, but also give Black more space. Once the e pawn might move forward in a certain time, the bishop on c7 will open up. The d pawn might move forward at the right time, opening up the d file. It's just more flexibility. Look at that. The queen and the bishop are already lining up. There are threats along the diagonal. e4 is something that White always has to watch out for. I think c takes d5 is a choice that a lot of us would also make intuitively in this position. What do you think, David? Is that a recapture that would have been your choice as well?
Definitely. I think these top players, the reason they're so good and the reason they're able to get so many wins in Rapid is because they're always looking for the most ambitious move. And Denis, he had to play some solid choices earlier. He had to give up his light squared bishop for a knight, but now he's playing ambitious chess. He's lined up his rooks. Look at those pieces. He's lined up the queen and bishop. Yes, they're not going anywhere now, but more importantly, he's got the pawns in the center. What to do next is anyone's guess. Who knows? It's become very strategic, very cagey. It's about when one of the sides decides to push in the center. Pawn to d4 for black, pawn to d4 for white is going to be the key as well. But I like the way that Denis has handled this so far. I think he needs to keep pieces on. Bishops gain in power, especially the bishop pair together. The kind of deeper you get into a game, the more the board clears up. But for now, everything under control. And yeah, Robert, I think the clock situation as well, we mentioned it. Denis, he's doing everything right. He's keeping his time advantage essential long-term in this match as a strategy.
And he's keeping the tension alive. I think he can continue to opt for improving moves. I would potentially double rooks on the e-file, waiting before I decide to push a pawn and create new tension. So Denis, he has several options. Queen c6 also looks very smart because it opens up new avenues. Maybe pawn to d4 for black. The bishop on c2 is a loose piece, and the white king may not feel fully safe if that diagonal opens. So both sides are trying to figure out which diagonals they can operate on. It's not entirely clear, although I think what is clear is if you give white one free move, it's going to be a skewer and a win of a rook for bishop. So I mean, this is a great play, very precise play from both these players. And Tanya, I think in both of our boards, we just are seeing quiet little moves, improving decisions, but very sturdy from all four of these winners semifinalists.
Yes, and I really like that Denis has parried that threat with an active move, rook to e6, also controlling the 6th rank. We might see the rook shuffle on to the king side. It also takes control of this a6 square, stopping that white pawn from moving forward on the left side of our screen. Just a simple harmony in black's position on Denis's board. I like the way he's placed the pieces, and there is this incredible maturity in his play that I've seen. I've seen it in the tour season last year. I've seen it in the Chessable Masters so far this year. The queen has attacked. Denis needs to find a good square for that queen. He moves it back onto the diagonal into the center of the board. His strategy, his positional understanding, where the pieces belong, it all seems to fall into place so well. And it's just not on the board. I was so impressed with his answers yesterday. When you asked him, David, who's your idol? Who's your hero? The guy just said, I've got no heroes. He's 17. And it's just amazing to hear him talk. And his play is a true reflection of his personality, I think.
Totally. In order to be the best, you have to beat the best, so you can't be too deferential towards them. You have to respect them, but not worship them too much. You have to be ready to pounce when the best players in the world make mistakes. And talking of the best players in the world, we see Magnus Carlsen against Fedoseev. That one as well, evolving. There have been some big decisions in that clash. The world number one has castled queenside with the white king, the board you see on the right of your screens there. He's also got the bishop pair, so both players with the white pieces in these two boards have the bishop pair long-term, doing very well, but still cagey for now. And Fedoseev trying to maneuver around with his knights. White pawn structure in that game, Magnus Carlsen against Fedoseev, slightly compromised. White has doubled A pawns. So many small factors to break down, and it's not clear who it favors yet. Evaluation bar on both boards slightly favoring white, but not by much. And it feels like, again, calm before the storm, this middle game, and the clock ticking. That could be a key factor, especially the Magnus Carlsen game. He's just gone below the 4-minute mark. We mentioned sometimes in the time scrambles, even mighty Magnus makes mistakes. So I think we should delve deeper into that game. Let's jump in. Magnus Carlsen against Fedoseev to try to evaluate. Has he worked this endgame magic we've been talking about, this queenless middle game, we'll call it? And here, I've got to say, first glance, I like white, purely because of this knight that he's just installed on the c6 square. But black has reasons to be optimistic too, Robert.
Yeah, this is a position where it resembles the other game in that white has the pair of bishops, but the queens are off the board, and of note is this doubled A pawns for white. But that's not actually a bad thing at this stage of the game. With so many pieces remaining on the board, a white can go after some of black's targets, and black is not creating a pass pawn because the A2 pawn still covers the pawn on the B file. This is maybe a deep concept for some, but the point is that it's not like some other double pawns, as we saw in Jan de Pomjit versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave earlier. So this last move from Fedoseev, great decision. He's trying to bring a knight to E5 or to C5, and that A5 a4 pawn as a target. A knight in the center usually is a good place to put it. And he wants to activate his pieces, including the bishop on d8, which does have a new diagonal to work with without the knight in its path. So Tanya, as we look at this position, I think all of us were inclined to believe that white is better, but I feel like there's some natural plans for black.
Agreed. And the point that you just made, without bishop on d8 stepping up to f6, taking control of the long diagonal a1 to h8 once white's bishop comes to d4, it looks like Magnus's bishop pair advantage is going to be neutralized really soon. Either there'll be a knight trade from c5 or the bishop trade from f6, and the pawn's structural weaknesses in Magnus's camp more than enough compensate for Fedosiev, the lack of the bishop. I love that knight on c6. I'm trying to understand, why is our Evalbar favoring white so much? Bishop d4, there seems to be bishop f6. If not, the knight is jumping forward into the game. What's going on here? Whoa. That's going on here. That's what's going on here.
Oh, we didn't expect that. And again, the blue arrow indicating that black's only move, or at least by far the best move, is rook takes bishop. That would not have been on my radar, Robert. An exchange sacrifice pretty much demanded by Fedosiev right now. This is a pawn sacrifice, and I just wanted to point out, let's jump in. If this pawn is captured, if you just whip this pawn off the board, what could be more natural? Go up material. Suddenly a new diagonal for white's uncontested light squared bishop, and tricks, tactics in the air. Black has two loose pieces on this diagonal, and something might well just drop off. So don't be too greedy. I think likewise, if you capture this pawn with the knight, there are problems tactically. Bishop takes, and suddenly watch out for your back rank. You can trade off a set of rooks, but now you have to be careful. If pawn takes, suddenly a deadly check, and your bishop will simply drop off next move. So Magnus initiating the tactics. Let's just show what he... Okay, he's played pawn takes pawn. He needed to play rook takes bishop and basically admit that, okay, if rook takes, there are tricks in black's favor this time with a nice pin. But pawn takes pawn. Robert, do you think this is going to backfire? Fedosiev playing that move instantly.
And look at Magnus's reply, what you were calling for, David. Bishop to b5. There are too many tactics now. And so what Magnus did is he gave away a pawn to free up diagonals for his bishops. And I say bishops plural, because now that knight on d7, if it continues to move, say to e5, well, and he does it a move too late, does Fedosiev. The right idea, wrong move order. I still feel like he has chances to survive this game. Let's not count him out just because the evaluation bar is slightly in Magnus' favor. The material imbalance now is knight and one pawn for rook. And let's not forget about those opposite color bishops. So black can use the dark squares to his advantage. White is going to try to operate on the light squares, but to what end? What light squares are actually valuable? That's an essential question. So I like the way that Fedosiev is handling this. I think this gives him the best practical chances.
We're far from out of it. It's they're just imbalanced, as we would say, Tanya. The players have no idea who's better. And Fedosiev, I could see him, especially if he gets this pawn 2 squares further down the board, him working things in his favor. Do you think Magnus needs to be careful as well?
I'm materialistic. I love the fact that there's an extra exchange for white, and I agree that black's got compensation, but that knight on c6, the bishop on b5, there are these tactical ideas of either knight takes a5 or knight takes b4 next. Watch out, the knight on d7 is still hanging. It's a threat that you need to take care of. To me, it just feels that Fedosiev needs to be on the defense. He needs to keep the activity going. He has to play active to defend this position. The plan that you're pointing out right now takes control of that. So it still requires a bit of prep. Right now, I'm expecting Fedosiev to move his knight. He does it. Knight to b6. The eval bar hits it. And Magnus just continues to keep opening up the position. The lines for the bishops and the lines for the rooks and the diagonals for the bishops.
And now it's busted for black. This is a problem. Once this rook gets in the game, you can see that Fedosiev is in trouble. I think it's important to analyze what he could have done instead. And it was just a one-move play from Fedosiev that would have kept him in the game rather than opening the rooks up. Bishop to g3. Just trying to blockade this d-pawn so the rooks don't have open files. When you're down material, especially when your opponent has 2 rooks, just one for yourself, you need to keep those rooks contained. So this would have been a good choice. Instead, what we see in the game, the rooks are loose, they are free to roam about the board, and now one of them is off the board, and that's bad news for black because that a5 pawn is tender, the d file remains open. Black can't keep everything under his control, and Magnus Carlsen for sure is winning this first game, David.
100%. It's all about that target on a5, pretty much indefensible in the kind of short term. And this white a pawn, not only does it promote on a light square guided by your bishop, but it's pretty much unstoppable. You have no rooks left as black. Yeah, knights are terrible at stopping these corner pawns, these rook pawns. So once the white knight retreats, takes this pawn, it's a matter of time before Fedoseev has to resign. We saw him sit back, exhale a moment ago. He knows it's over. The white rook doesn't look impressive now, but it will soon join the fun. And I think we'll see a very simple plan. Black's counterplay, far too slow. And Magnus, he's going pawn hunting. He's going to hunt down the full point in this game soon, closing out the victory. Again, just in the space of 1 or 2 moves, this is how strong the top players are. They punish you, one small imperceptible slip. And here we go, knight takes pawn, inevitable. It's just a straightforward plan. Magnus about to bank it. We think, Tanya, should we go to the other game where there's still action on the board?
Definitely. I just want to say this is how strong Magnus Carlsen can be, especially in these positions. I mean, we were talking about an equal opening, an outcome where white had nothing. And then just out of nowhere, Magnus comes up with a winning position. How did it happen? When did it all go so wrong? It's just unbelievable how he makes these things just appear on the board and makes chess look so easy. It's insane. He's playing against one of the best players in the world. He has a completely winning position out of a completely equal opening. Magnus Carlsen just doing Magnus things. I think it's a good time, David, to jump over to our other board, which is far from a queenless position. It's an exciting middle game. Robert, what do you make of what we're seeing on the left side of our screen between Denis Lazovic and Jose Martinez?
It's definitely heating up on the left-hand side board because there are open diagonals for both players. Usually, open space, it is good for the player with the pair of bishops as Jose Martinez. His camera's on the bottom left-hand side of our screen. But Denis Lazovic, he just doesn't back down against anyone. It's super impressive. The game between Magnus and Fedoseev is officially over. No surprises there. Magnus takes game 1. So now we can fully be attentive to this game on the left-hand side of our screen between Jose and Denis. Magnus up 1-0. One of these players would like to join him. I mean, David, look at Jose's clock. He's down under that minute, but we know he's a bullet brawler. He's won a number of them.
We're used to seeing this from Jose at this point. Yesterday against Jan Nepomniachtchi, every time we jumped into that game, he had like 5-10 seconds on his clock, yet he was able to maneuver. He checkmated Jan Nepomniachtchi twice, and whoa. Wow, is this a blunder from Denis Lazovic? Why is this a mistake? Queen to f6, he's trying to trade off the queens. But rook takes d5, just wins a piece. There's actually, wow, some brilliant tactics here, some back rank ideas. I wonder whether he'll see it. If not, we will show it. A double question mark, a blunder, but an understandable one from Denis Lazovic. And Jospem, Jose Martinez spots it. Queen sacrifice, double exclamation mark, and he's going to show the reason. Look at this. Rook takes d4 at the end, a pin, and you win. You're going to emerge with a rook and 2 bishops for a queen. Mathematically, this one is pretty much over. Brilliant, Robert. Just in the blink of an eye.
And you could see Jose, he was quizzically looking at it. Wait, this doesn't look right. I didn't spot Queen f6 on my radar. And Denis shakes his head like, I should have seen that. Come on. And the point is that loose pieces drop off. A rook and 2 bishops, they overwhelm a queen. It's worth more in value. 2 bishops and a rook, that's worth 11, maybe even 12, so a queen's 9. So this one, it should be easy conversion. Now, Tanya, I mean, Denis Lazovic, he doesn't blunder often, but he just had a critical error at that moment. And now it seems game 1 for Jospem.
Robert, we've been talking about how Denis makes no mistakes. We haven't seen that happen. And this was a big tactical blunder. And this puts him on the back foot. I think it's a hard one to recover from. The bishop can line up, now threatening bishop to e4. A huge pin you have to watch out for. There will be coordination between the rook and the 2 bishops. One of the rooks will come on to the open file, either the B line or the A line. And for Denis Lazovic, it is a desperate situation. Too much material down. You have to be a little careful. White needs to fall back with the bishop. The d3 pawn can be picked up at the moment because the rook on e2 is tied down to defend the bishop on d2.
Yes, that pawn may drop, but David, I feel like this is, for someone of Jose's caliber, just so easy. This is a cakewalk for him because you have to push your pawns. That opens up more diagonals, and the white king is too safe.
Simply black has fewer pieces. You've got a queen, great, but rooks and bishops do a great job at containing a queen, and you have 2 of those bishops. So yeah, it feels like a matter of time. Jose, he's done the hard work. But then again, there are tricks. I was going to say, is there a trick? He was, wow, double attack suddenly from Denis Lazovic.
Whoa!
Oh, what a
Wow, double
blunder.
attack.
Yeah, he thought queen d1 check. He missed queen b5. Tanya, what a find from Denis.
And Jose can't believe it. And it was because he was down to 5 seconds on the clock. He's in big danger now. And maybe white is still fine because you've got that extra pawn and you can set up a fortress. But this is heartbreaking. Jose needs to get himself together and make sure that there are no more misses right now. He's down to seconds on the clock.
I think he's still going to win the game. David, I don't know about you, but I'd much rather have all of these pieces for the queen. There's no attack against the white king. But Jose, he's still shaking his head, David. I don't think he's over it.
Understandably, he's going to be kicking himself. He had an easily winning position. We were just praising him, talking about how it should be pretty much automatic, and it would have been if he hadn't walked into a double attack. So, moral of the story, everyone, keep your pieces defended, protect each other, coordinate, loose pieces drop off, and he put his bishop on a5 far away from the rest of his army. No surprise that the tactics didn't work in his favor, but okay, he's going for the black king now, bishop h5, a monster threat. Denis has to work out with no time on his clock. Can he simply take this pawn? I think he can, but then he might have to run with the black king forward. So still scary times here. Jose recovering, but setting the traps. Bishop h5 still on tap. Denis, this is not over. He still has to find really accurate moves to save this.
David, that's a really nice move. Taking away that f6 square, bishop h5, rook to e8 was a big threat. Checks coming in. I think this is going to end in a draw. Now that the queen and the king are separated, you're not going to lose the queen, but without white having connected pawns, it's hard to imagine a passer for Jose either. Draw the most likely.
Oh, what a find! He gives away his pawn to save his king, and now a draw, I would say, is more likely. But Tanya, until that move was found, I thought that Denis was in some trouble.
And Jose continues to shake his head. He can't believe what he's just missed. He was rook and 2 bishops for a queen, blundering in one move. But this is rapid chess, and he shakes his head. He knows this is over. This is ending in a draw. Any moment now, David.
Miracles do happen, Denis Lazovic. That's why you never ever give up. He blundered. He was pretty much just a piece down for nothing, but he kept fighting. And even there were checkmating attacks against his king, but he's a cold-blooded defender. So impressive stuff. Just tactical vision for both of these two players, really at the top of their game, you can tell. 2 slips, one on either side, ultimately balancing each other out, and now we will see a repetition. And draw is confirmed. Battle of the underdogs, in the end, after a few twists and turns, after a roller coaster, ended peacefully. Wow. Breathless action, Tanya.
That was an up and